Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, good morning everybody, and welcome to this 41st episode, season 11, and hopefully I was on a nice sunny Saturday morning. It's like change to today's format, so bear with me with this one. So Curtis is on a well-earned break. He's changed his week this week, and he's going down to the farmer's dog. So he's going experiencing the new Clarkson restaurant as part of his little break there down south. So hopefully Curtis is enjoying some of this lovely weather. But that does give me the opportunity to welcome Cal Davis back as the co-host for this week. So welcome, Cal, back to the podcast.
Good morning, Phil.
You're becoming a regular to this, aren't you? You're getting used to it now.
There you go.
But also today, and you know, another reason for having Carl on, other than that, he did a fantastic job for both me and Curtis when we were not able to host this. But also, we're going to be joined live by Stephen Whitton, our normal Men-Able guru this week at the halfway point in person. And I know Carl does quite a bit in that space as well, and through some of the podcasts that you get involved with and other things, Carl. So I thought it'd be a great idea to have you and Steve on at the same time, and we'll just have a good 10 minutes or so chatting about the well-being and mental health within the automotive sector, and chatting about some of the things that you two guys have been talking about. So hopefully that's okay for you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
That'll be a good one. So a couple of things to give a shout out for is we've had some fantastic interviews recently with ETT, the AI specialist on that supplier special. We had James Chu from iVendi on as well on that supplier special, and the big one with the interview there with Robert Forrester from Virtue, which never disappoints and is always very insightful. So if you're not listening to any of those interviews, then they are on your podcast feed. Do jump back and have a listen to them. Those that are interested, we've got a Vehicle Remarketing Association AGM due on the 3rd of July. It's down at Perry Bar as usual, PCA Perry Bar there. It's a great members meeting. Obviously it's our AGM as well, which I'll be chairing and hosting. If you've not registered for that and you do normally get involved, then please do either drop me a note or check that out on the internet. And the other one is, Carl, you're aware of this one, is the charity have their big birthday, and it's 120 years they've been going into it.
It's amazing. I think Ben is a standout charity. I think the mission that they've had for, as you say, 120 years is admirable. And you just come across the messages everywhere you go. I think their PR and their marketing's good. So it's going to be a super event, I'm sure.
It will be. And we talked last week with Curtis there about some of the recent changes in terms of that leadership team since Rachel Clifford has taken control as CEO, and really making those first moves in the new direction and what she's focused on for the new future of Ben. So that's down the 17th of July, and that's down at the British Motor Museum. And I know there's emails gone out to industry leaders across the sector to join them in that celebration.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
Companies already featured in our supplier special have been Generational, Tracker, MTC, Jigcar, Checkvic, Car Care and AutoChart, and more recently ETT and iVendi. So if you'd like to profile your business, then get in touch with me or Curtis, and we're both on LinkedIn.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
So the headlines today we're going to be talking about shortly with Carl is that in car dealer, the SMMT welcomes significant achievement as trading confirms UK car tariff deal is done. And also we've got the Motor Trade news with QuickFit's 1.7 billion pothole bill prompts call for targeted repair levies. Motor Trade news unlocking new after-sales opportunities for car dealers in the era of electrification. And then after the break today, we'll be going over to AM Online, talking a little bit about the Luca De Maio has stepped down as Renault Group CEO, and that will be in July. And then obviously following that is the head of budget brand Dacia amongst contenders to succeed Luca De Maio as Renault's CEO. And then we'll be finishing off today as a quick and finally with a little bit of interesting news for the UK from one of the Chinese new entrants and their rollout of EV chargers. But to begin with, let's start with having a chat through some of the headlines with Carl on the first one around the SMMT, Carl. What's your thoughts of this one? I mean, obviously it's a big move and there's a lot of moving plates with this tariff agreement with the US and the UK.
Well, My Cause has obviously celebrated the deal, and it's a far better position than some of the bigger numbers that were being mentioned. But we still have got a 10% tariff. And the very fact that we're celebrating that there's going to be a 10% tariff shows what a crazy world we live in. Because if we'd have said a year ago, British automotive product going into the States was going to have a 10% levy slapped on it, we'd be happy with that. We'd have been falling about laughing, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with this, and say the headline in Car Dealer is that the SMMT welcomes significant achievement as Trump confirms UK car tariff deal is done, and saying that the US UK deal is done. Donald Trump says as he meets Keir Starmer at the G7. We'll keep away from him picking up the papers and things like that on this one. But the Prime Minister said that they completed the deal and implement on car deal tariffs and aerospace. And as you say there, he's saying it should be recognised as a significant achievement. But I think to your point, Carl, it's still not great. I mean, I suppose it's better than some of the markets are getting. But as you say there is still cost to the UK exporters through any product going into the US.
I think it's. I'm a bit embarrassed by it all. Our Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Now he's on first name terms with the president. It's Donald this and Donald that. I don't know about the deal's been done. I think we've been done. 10%, and organisations like JLR, a massive contributor to the Chancellor here, having to delay vehicles, not ship the vehicles for fear of having even greater tariffs. I think we've been done.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's what the reality is that we export. And you say you've got to be careful on this one because our main exporter from the UK to the US is, as you noted there, is JLR. They make a large proportion of the majority of vehicles exiting the UK into the US there. We obviously import very few US-made vehicles into the UK market, but it goes slightly wider than that, doesn't it? And that's the implications with this, with some of our tier 1 to 4 suppliers that will be putting product out of the UK into the US market, which will be incurring those tariffs as well. So there is still a cost and there's still an impact on productivity and profitability for those UK exporters to the US.
Yeah, and the readers and listeners, many will have noticed that there is a 100,000 unit cap on completed products. So those finished cars, that 10% is capped off at 100,000 units. So, the natural sort of opportunity and demand is being suppressed. Or, the question is, what's the next level of tariff if we're exceeding 100,000? And in the press over the last weekend, I think it was, there was a headline that ministers are going to have to decide which manufacturers can actually contribute to the 100,000, and which will be left, to pay the heavier tax. So it's a random situation. It's a macro level thing. We can't influence it much more than we probably have. We've got what we've got. We've been done.
I suppose the thing with this is you never know what's around the corner in the next 24 hours, do you? That things can change very significantly. But just to finish off there, that the quote here from Mike Hawes, and the SMMT CEO, said that this is great news for the UK automotive industry, helping the sector avoid the severest level of tariffs and enabling many manufacturers to resume deliveries immediately. We wait to see the full details of the deal and how it will be administered, but this will be a huge reassurance to those that work in the sector and bolster the confidence of our important US customers. Now, just moving on to the next story, because it feels like there's bigger things to worry about closer to home, and heading over to a fantastic story in Motor Trade News. As I said at the start there, the headline is Quick Fit, and 1.7 billion pothole bill prompts call for targeted repair levies. And this is research from the Quick Fit is that revealed most of UK drivers support ring-fenced road repair levies for heavy goods and delivery vehicles amidst rising pot-related costs. Now, we do know this is an ongoing issue in the UK, isn't it? And there doesn't seem to be, although there is big money being allocated to it through the recent budgets, but it's not going anywhere near what the problem is it?
No, it's not. When I was a kid, every spring, you get your car covered in tar because the roads were being resurfaced. At the moment, we barely got enough money to actually fill the potholes, and there's no chippings going on top of them. So the whole sort of situation has changed. But just going back to that report, I'm really pleased that from the digitalisation of MOTs, we're getting data like this that we wouldn't have had back in the days when an MOT certificate was a handwritten pad. The very fact that we know it is 1.7 billion cost because of the potholes through, suspension damage, typically broken springs. I think that's great data to understand in the first place. But there's some interesting points in the report for those that read it about the pothole repair tracker and the survey that had been done with regards to those in favour of actually having a levy on the operators of heavier vehicles, trucks, and indeed delivery vans. Did you?
Yeah. As you say there, 56% of drivers support the dedicated levy on HGVs for road maintenance, and that's obviously, as you say there, through the interestingly named PIT report, which is the Pothole Impact Tracker. So I think when you go into the government with these kind of things, it's great to go with this kind of evidence and facts and figures, rather than just we need the potholes repairing. Given the cost of repair of some of these vehicles is significant.
Yeah, I've got some trades on the farm here helping me out with some building works, and the joiner took his van for an MOT. Both of his rear springs are broken, failed the MOT. That fail will go into that report. So I think it's great that we're capturing the data.
It is there, yeah. And there's a great comment in here from Dan Joyce, who's the operations director at QuickFit, said that the data shows that there is an increasing pressing need to invest in the maintenance of the road network, but our new research highlights that there is no easy answer as to how this is funded. Motorists already feel that they are contributing enough, so it is understandable that they want the additional burden to be on the heavier vehicles believed to do the most damage to the road surfaces. So it's kind of, who are the ones doing the damage to the roads and who should be paying for that damage to be repaired is the big question. Should the government take the whole cost of this kind of repair, or should it be then put onto the general taxpayer through road tax, etc., or as it actually, to the point that's sort of been alluded here, should it be focused on those that are making the most damage to the roads in the future?
The person that's damaged the roads the most, Philip, is Boris Johnson. Pressing the button on the HS2 vanity project, which is just ballooning out of all proportion. We could have great roads and great railway stations if we hadn't gone down this rabbit hole of HS2. Don't get me on to that.
Won't get into politics too much. Yeah, historical politics. Yes. So sticking with motor trade news and the final story in this first half before we chat a little bit more with Stephen Whitton and Carl on mental health and wellbeing for the automotive sector. We've got a story in here which actually come from myself at Cox Automotive. It's thinking about, and Carl, you know this from your time in the sector. We spend a lot of time talking about the sales side of the dealers, and not enough about the after sales side and the reliance on that after sales revenue, that after sale income. And we talk a lot about the transition to electrification, but actually behind all this is, there are concerns around what impact that will have on the aftermarket, on that after sales revenue income as EVs or alternative fuels become the more dominant fuel type. But this headline is unlocking new after sales opportunities for car dealers in the era of electrification. But this is where we spent a little bit of time looking at the MOT failure data from the DVSA and the SMMT, and really thinking about, actually, there are areas within that EV space that we have got as a sector some opportunities for some good revenue opportunities from electric vehicles.
Yeah, I think it's closely linked to the Quick Fit article. Bottom line is, we know from the research and your commentary on it, EV services are 35% cheaper. That's a fact. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other opportunities. And some of the opportunities that were highlighted in that report, the battery health check diagnostics is massive. And I bet there'll be listeners to this podcast that, like me, have probably fried every mobile phone battery they've ever had because they haven't actually managed the battery life properly. So this sort of thermal management and battery degradation, there's loads of opportunity there if we're really going to help those EV owners and the EV batteries live a full life rather than just ruining them through ignorance, really.
Yeah, no, and I think some of the data and one of the points in trying to sort of highlight this to the sector was, we hear a lot that EVs have very low maintenance, very low aftercare requirements because of the fewer moving parts and etc. And to your point, the main issue, albeit an expensive issue, is the battery itself, which 90% of the time will be under manufacturer guarantee, depending on its usage and depending on its servicing and things like this. But one thing that has been highlighted, as I said, through this data through the DVSA is actually we know that tyres are wearing quicker on battery electric vehicles. Part of that is due to the weight of those vehicles. Part of it is through the torque and obviously the braking pressure on tyres when you're driving these vehicles. Some of that is through to driving behaviours. You're taking somebody out of that BMW 3 Series diesel that they've had for the last three leases, and then suddenly putting them in this battery electric vehicle that's doing 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds. And there's things like this, and there is a lot of work going along the side of this from the Michelin and others in that tyre space of improvement around that tyre wear. Because it is a big problem, but at the same time, your brakes, your suspension arms come into some of this as well. A little less so on today's models, very much on the earlier models, because your first iteration of EVs were really an ICE vehicle converted to an EV, and now the new models are ground up electric vehicles. So really trying to say to the sector that there is opportunities here for revenue that you should be thinking about and looking for within the EV space.
Yeah, it was a good report. I'd urge everybody to take a little bit of time to read through it, and we've got to adapt. We've got to pivot. We can't just hark back to how it used to be. And let's agree that ICE vehicle maintenance is going to be the majority of workshop work for several years to come. But we've got to get prepared. We've got to get on the game because we just can't lose 35% of our after sales revenue. So we've got to find those new channels. And the great thing about this sector is we're not always, we're sometimes dealing with a bit of inertia, but we do change, and we've got to change in this respect around EV maintenance.
Well, after the break, do stick with us. We're going to be going live to Stephen Whitton, who will be joining us for a 10-minute conversation about mental health and well-being in the automotive space.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand, wherever you are, and on your podcast feed. Next up is our latest Men-Able moment, looking at mental wealth and well-being awareness and best practice in the automotive sector. With me, Stephen Whitton.
We've got to change that one, Steve, and said me, Stephen Whitton, and Carl Davis. Well, welcome, Steve. I know we've got 10 minutes of your time before you need to go and get a train. It was great to have you on, and we know how much listeners love your Men-Able moments every month. Those snippets, those little short snippets of things to think about when talking about mental health and well-being in the automotive space. But I thought it'd be a great opportunity, as I said at the offset here, to get you and Carl, because Carl does quite a bit in that space as well, and just talk for 10 minutes in terms of the big things around. Has it changed? Is it evolving? Is it getting better? And what more can be done around mental health and well-being within the automotive sector? So, welcome, Stephen, and let's kick this off.
Thank you for having me. By the way, I mean, you guys have been a great supporters of ours and helped with this platform, and it's great, and it's lovely to hear people like these Men-Able moments. And I was at an event last week where somebody made a point of saying to me that they always have a listen. So, you know who you are. We're accompanying you on your Saturday run.
Yes, so. Yes, I know it is as well. Yes. So, as I say, people do love it, and it is those short little snippets. But we thought we'd extend it out a little bit because there's been a few things this week. So, we'll get onto it in a minute in terms of a post that Dale Wyatt put out this week, and we do love Dale, love him to bits. He's coming back on the podcast in a month or so. But, and Carl, I think you followed his post up with something as well. So very quickly, Steve, I mean, to those big questions, is it changing? Is it getting better in the automotive sector in terms of attitude and shift on mental health and well-being, or should we say mental wealth and well-being within the automotive sector? And really, what more needs to be done?
Well, do you know what? I mean, the old phrase, 2 steps forward, 1 back. I think when I first started looking into this stuff, and thank you for calling me a guru earlier, by the way. That's me sitting here in my white linen with my joss sticks, smoking away in the background. But no, when I first started looking at this, I would have described it as sort of 1 step forward and 2 back. And I think we're the other way round a little bit now, if that makes sense. I think there's been a great deal of work done around raising awareness. Mental health is now a much more sort of mainstream conversation. People are becoming attuned to the fact that we all have mental health, just as we all have physical health. However, he says, trying to resist the word but, I still get people reaching out to me describing scenarios or situations daily where you think, yeah, we've still got some work to do around attitudes, haven't we? One person recently said to me that their manager had described them, they're a mental health first aider, and had described them as, well, you're the mental health person in this business, you sort it out. And you just think, yeah, we're still not quite getting it in some aspects. In many others, we are. And as you said, the mental wealth side of it, that's pricked people's ears up and made them take notice, because obviously that's the kind of language that fits very well with what our business is all about. So,
Steve, wouldn't you agree that for it to really land and become cultural in an organisation, it's got to come from the very top, and it's got to be more than just paying the bill or joining the club. It's got to be daily, cultural, habitual. thinking in the first instance, and then behaviour, hasn't it?
Yeah, 100%. It totally has. And, I've got a bit of a pet peeve of those organisations that say, oh, yeah, we do this and we do that. And that all that actually means is give a fairly large donation to a charity and at the same time put posters on the wall. When you're absolutely right, Carl, that the crux of this comes from the top. And the organisations where we really, really see them a massive difference is when the CEO or the MD properly picks it up. And that actually takes me on to another point, which is one of the things I always say to the CEOs I work with is, who have you got in your business that asks you how you are? And nearly always they say, their eyes look up at the ceiling trying to work out who it is, and they go, actually, it's a really good question because nobody ever does.
It's interesting, that one.
Yeah, because they see the stripes, and they see the badge on the door and just think, oh, I can't ask the boss how he or she is.
Yeah.
It's bizarre, yeah.
When you do it, because I've done it a few times in my career, and you get your CEO or whoever that person is, I won't name him, say anything, but they're straight into business, and I go, yeah, how are you?
Yeah.
It's tough at the minute. There's this, and this. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you all right? And you can see the step back and think, they don't get asked that enough.
Mm.
And they're just a human being like anybody else, and they're just doing their job as you're doing your job.
Yeah.
And they have as many challenges, if not more, sometimes as you do or whatever else. And just for somebody to say, forget that for a minute. How are you doing? Are you all right? Everything good? Everything family well? Everything else? And you can see them think, actually,
it can be a lonely space, guys, can't it? If you're the person at the top, the boy or the girl at the top, it rests with you, and that might be the city, or it might be other shareholders, or whether it's the whole team morale. It can be a lonely place. And you mentioned Dale's post. He put a post out, everyone, a few days ago. He's got a lot of followers, so many of you will have seen it. And it showed an image of 3 envelopes, envelope 1, 2, and 3. And basically, the punchline to the story was somebody takes over a new operation. It's not going well. He opens the drawer, sees 3 envelopes, opens the first one. It says, blame me, blame the previous person. Time goes by, it's still not going well. He opens the second envelope and it says, reorganize. And then guess what? That doesn't work. He opens the third envelope and it says, prepare 3 envelopes. And it's a tongue-in-cheek message, but it's so often played out. And Steve, I think you are a guru. I think you're an evangelist around mental wealth. But one thing I would definitely say is we can make things easier for ourselves if we actually get the right people sitting in the right seat on the right bus. And I did follow on, as you said, Phil, with a post that said, do you know what, after 25 years of being in professional services, doing this advising, coaching, training stuff, I'd recommend these things. I'm just going to run them out really quickly. Hire carefully. Go about it like you're looking for a long-term relationship, not a one-night stand. Onboard thoroughly. Have a single-page plan of how that onboarding is going to take place. Coach constantly. When you're walking from A to B with your eyes and ears open, that's an opportunity to coach somebody, give them some feedback, which comes on to point 4. Review regularly in a meaningful way, succinctly, around the core aspects of the job. And then 5, redirect quickly. And if we do those 5 things, and if it becomes a habit across the senior leadership team and all management and supervisory staff, we don't need to go on to the 6th and final point, which is fire fast. If those 5 things have been done well, don't procrastinate, make a change. But we shouldn't have to make too many changes if we do good hires and we follow those first 5 points. Wouldn't you agree? Would you say that the wage bill should surely equal the company's greatest asset, not the company's biggest bill?
100%. I think it's people at the core of everything with this. It's people, and as you say there, it's what are you actually looking for an individual that comes to the hiring. Making sure you onboard them thoroughly. I mean, so many times throughout my career, there's the onboarding is the big thing. You spend all this time and effort and money on recruiting for a role, and then you spend no time with them. It's kind of there's no good onboarding process. And then if you do that, kind of leave them to it. There's no coaching, there's no mentoring, there's no continuity. And, I just through my changes in my career, I've seen how, the good operators do it properly, which kind of leads me on to sort of a final question for yourself, Steve, with this. And so with your time now, doing what you're doing in the sector, and you said that before about 2 steps forward, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back, is now more like, 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And the time that you're spending with businesses, I mean, can you see where those businesses, in terms of that mental wealth, that well-being, the understanding about, this recruitment, and back to Carl's point, the onboarding and those decision and coaching and regular mentoring and close relationship with their employees, can you see the difference in those businesses that you work with that are doing it well, and those
100%.
that are not so well?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think as part of what makes, probably mine and maybe parts of your stories sort of relevant and relatable as well is, let's be totally brutally honest about it. Very few people that I speak to come into the motor trade, particularly in the sales side of it, because they had a burning desire to do so when they were at school. I mean, in my case, I didn't get the qualifications I needed to go and do what I really wanted to do. So I ended up selling cars. And before I do it, 35 years later, I've been in the motor trade all my life. And couple that with where I'm going with this is that what went into that role was a fairly lonely, fearing rejection young man who felt that suddenly I'm in this environment where I've got to prove myself and I've got to be up there with everyone else. And so when I go round and I talk about that, and I get lots of nods and lots of people saying, "Oh my God, that really resonates, as that's like a bit like my story or a bit like this." And what we're finding is that just by opening up this subject, people are now starting to deal with some of their own personal issues at whatever level they're at. And that then carries itself into the business in the form of, well, actually, if I concentrate on me, if I'm okay, if, dare I use a aviation analogy of putting your own oxygen mask on first, if I start doing that, then that puts me in a good place to help other people. And then that helps me transcend to a place which is where I think I'm at now, which is actually I'm all about helping other people. And I can do that with joy. I can do that with, good focus and dedication and all the rest of it. And as a result, you do see people responding. And I don't think anyone ever gets out of bed in the morning and thinks, I'm going to go into work and make someone's day really bad today. But they do bring stuff with them. We need to get rid of the old kind of leave your problems at the door, you're at work now. That's out of date and not fit for purpose. And really just accept that the people that we have in our businesses, 90 to 95% of what's going on for them is stuff that's going on outside of the business. But if we create the right environment, we all understand each other, we all talk about this stuff as openly as we want to, then yeah, to answer your point, we really are seeing some significant difference. People perform well when they feel good about themselves.
Steve, they do. Our paths cross quite often in the automotive space. I've followed you into businesses and I've seen the impact you've had. But one thing I'd like to say to listeners is don't confuse what Steve is promoting with something that's soft and fluffy. It's highly commercial, because if you've got an unhappy, dysfunctional person, team, organization, you're not going to get the best results. So if you can create the environment where people can function properly and they feel part of something that's meaningful, that's great. And the final thing I would say is we also need to, going back to that point about the right seat on the bus, make sure that people are in the right role. And those that are on the front line that need to take some flack, we've got to help them with their resilience and their mental toughness. And that's something definitely that would form part of a good hire, understanding through a psychometric test how this person is made and what type of role we might offer them. Because if we don't do that, we're definitely going to create more problems in the business than we need.
Steve, just to finish on finally, because I know you're short of time, but one key message, and then, how people get hold of you. One key message of what, really resonates of what people need to think about in that mental wealth and well-being space? And then, how can listeners get hold of you if they want to have a conversation further?
This is not soft and fluffy stuff. This is real hard-nosed commercial stuff, and I'm increasingly seeing the people part being put higher up on the agenda, and that needs to continue. And in order to do that, we need to create space for people to bring the best version of themselves to work. And in order to do that, it's giving people the opportunity to open up and speak, as appropriately or whatever's right for them. And we are seeing a change in that respect, but we all have mental health, just as we all have physical health. We've changed the language to mental wealth. That's got people's interest a little bit more. And, it really links to, what's going on in my business. And again, I still hear lots and lots of stories of individuals. There's the guys in the independent sector as an example. Very lonely. It's very isolating. They're working on their own. Who can they turn to? And if we do what we can to create a bit of a community and just be kind, there's no reason to not be kind. And God, doesn't the world need that right now? And just, look out for each other. And if people do genuinely want help with that, then you can get hold of me on stephen.whitton@menable.org.
Fantastic, Stephen. I mean, I found that chat fascinating. Great for coming on. Appreciate the time out on that. It's great to have you back on in person. It's been a long time, and huge thank you for me and the listeners for what you're doing around this.
Keep on keeping on, Steve. Keep on keeping on, mate.
Thanks, guys. It's a challenge at times, but when I'm on the mission, I'm on it. So thank you.
Well, stay safe, stay well, and we'll chat to you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Well, Carl, we better get back to the headlines before my voice really does give up before the end of this one. So, heading back to the final section here on the headlines there, and over on AM Online, this was covered quite significantly, as you can well imagine, through the nationals and the trade media, that Luca Di Maio has to step down as Renault Group CEO in July. And this is that he's stepping down from his role on the 15th of July after 5 years at the helm to join the French fashion house Kering, which owns both the brands Gucci and Saint Laurent. So this is a big move for the sector, isn't it? I mean, he's really turned around Renault in the last 5 years to where they are today.
He has, the numbers: 2.6 million cars, 114 countries. He employs 98,000 people, and Renault, I think, was lost before his tenureship. I think it was really lost. Now, I've never met this guy. I don't know too much about him, but maybe he's just somebody that likes fixing things, and maybe that's the draw to actually go to the fashion house and actually that brand organization and turn them around. I think it's having the right horse for the right course, isn't it? And he's definitely put Renault in a good position when you think about some of the challenges they had with the Renault Nissan association also. So fair play to him.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think there's always a question: is do you leave when you're at the top, or do you leave when you're at the bottom? And he's certainly doing the leaving at the top here. And as you say, that, I mean, he's turned the Renault brand around, and I think just generally, sentiment from the Renault dealer network, not just here in the UK, but across Europe and some of the international markets, is positive with their lineup, their strategy, their new focus that Luca Di Maio has definitely put in there. And there's a perfect statement in the post, the media here from AM Online, that sums up what you just really said there, that there comes a time in one's life when one knows the job is done. At Renault Group, we have faced immense challenges in less than 5 years. We have achieved that many through thought was impossible. Today, the results speak for themselves. They are the best in our history. So really, as he's put in there, he's leading on a high. He's gone through some challenges. We've gone through the COVID pandemic period, the supply challenges, etc., and Renault's potentially misdirection and come out the other side. And as you say, there is leaving on a definite high, as he's put there. But interesting, this leads on to the next story, which kind of supports this. And the big question now is who replaces Luca De Meo as the new CEO at Renault. And there's a piece here in the Financial Times saying, head of budget brand Dacia among contenders to succeed Luca De Meo as Renault CEO, saying that the head of the Renault's budget brand Dacia, I'm sure they don't like that being referenced as that, but Denis Levot is the front runner to become the chief executive at the French automaker following the shock announcement of Luca De Meo's exit from to the luxury brand Kering. So, I mean, there's going to be a few people probably at the top of the list on this one, but I think there's a few forerunners that they're trying to allude to in this story.
Yeah, that will include some outsiders, but I think if you look at Dacia, I've got a lot of admiration for Dacia, and I think for their business strategy, and it's referred to as budget. I think there's a place in the world, and it's not just Dacia, but there's a place in the world for more simplified product, and Dacia fits that really well. So it would not surprise me if the head of Dacia takes over the whole parent company CEO role.
Yeah, as you say there, I mean, referring to it as the budget brand, as you say, it plays a part in the sector. It's that cost of entry for many of the drivers in the market that need that kind of vehicle. They've got a very good value proposition in some of their EV product that's in the market and on the horizon. So really, there's some good opportunities there. And to be fair, anybody that comes into that role now is coming into a good role and a good position for Renault, isn't it? They're coming in at a high as Luca's left it in. So, I think it'd be interesting to see this one as to who does take the role. But as he leaves on the 15th of July, we won't have to wait long, I presume, before we get to know. Hopefully there'll be a decision quicker than what we saw with Stellantis after Carlos Tavares' exit, and that took quite a while for them to pick his replacement. But we will hopefully hear soon on that one.
And there's a polarity in performance because, by all accounts, he left that organisation in a terrible state, and we can see evidence of that all over the place. So anyway, good luck to Luca.
And finally this week, and we talked about it briefly at the start of today's podcast, that over in Fleet News, that BYD will start UK rollout of megawatt EV chargers here in the UK in 2026, and that the BYD has confirmed it'll install their new flash chargers here in the UK, capable of charging a car in a few minutes. The new ultra-fast charging system for electric vehicles can add 250 miles of range in just 5 minutes. The 1 megawatt charging speed is around 3 times as fast as the current fastest charging system for passenger cars. So this is fantastic news. I mean, just thinking about that comparison of what the Tesla network did for Tesla and their brand, particularly over there in the US and obviously in other markets here in the UK. But really having that network set up. But I mean, the speed of these is kind of a solution, because they talk about the parity between ICE and EV now, that you'll be able to charge your EV as fast, if not faster, than you can fill your tank of diesel or petrol.
That makes it a game changer. But what's really interesting in the article is they're promising, quote, a few stations in every European country by 2026. So it's going to be all about getting access to that flash charger in the first instance. But if we get enough coverage, it's a game changer. I don't have a problem having an EV if I've got to wait 5 minutes. I've got a problem if I've got to wait 25 minutes, and I've got a problem if I'm in a really long queue for the charger. So if the infrastructure comes on fast enough, it really could be a game changer.
Yeah, like you say, I mean, negatively, like you say, it's where are these going to be installed initially? Where are they? So you don't want to be driving too far to get to a fast charger. That's not the point, is it? But
No.
I think it demonstrates the scope and scale of the opportunity ahead. The fact that this is capable to do, and they do talk that it will be an open network as well. So it's not just for BYD, which was obviously what Tesla was initially set up as, and we know the headlines and controversy that caused when they opened it up to non-Tesla product. But this kind of shows that that there is other opportunities. As I say, and as you've alluded to there, Carl, one of the big issues is infrastructure that comes to an EV, that people just want to be able to charge when they need to charge it, not have to think about too much planning. There is planning involved with driving an EV, but not too much planning when it comes to doing those longer journeys in your EV. But I think this is great news, and particularly they have identified the UK as one of those initial markets as well that they're going to be coming to.
Yeah, it's one to watch, definitely. Let's get the infrastructure in place, and it will be a game changer for sure.
Well, I mean, that's it for this week. So hopefully you enjoyed the slightly different running order of today's podcast, and it's great. Again, thank you, Carl, for taking the time out and joining as co-host of the Motor Trade Radio podcast and all. It's I know you enjoy it, and me and Curtis do really enjoy having you on. So a huge thank you to yourself for taking the time out there, and for joining Stephen Whitton in that unique Men-Able moment this week, where we got to listen to Steve in person rather than a pre-record Men-Able moment, and expand on the conversation a little bit further about the shifts. And I think you both, from my perspective, listening to you both there, made some extremely valid points. I think it's positive that there are things changing, but it's what they are changing to, and what needs to be done for the future.
Thanks, Philip. I love working with you and Curtis and Stephen, and I enjoyed the conversation with Steve. And I think one of the most insightful things that he mentioned was, one of the last few points was, be kind as a leader. And it's amazing what a superpower that comes with regards to your team of people when they want to lean in and really help you. So yeah, wise words from Steve as ever. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Carl. Well, we'll be back next week, hopefully with me having a voice and with Curtis as co-host. So again, thank you to Steve and Carl for joining me this week on the podcast. And please do stay tuned for next Saturday's podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.